I do wonder if it's fair on Bill that each time we record now, I give him less and less opportunity to study the slides that we're going to look at together. But
Yeah,
I'm sort of,
as in zero opportunity.
I envy your position of freshness. You meet what
Oh,
we
yeah, oh,
discuss
sure.
completely fresh.
Oh, is that how you're going to play it? Okay.
But that's true. How often do we get the chance to really meet something without a kind of prerequisite or a forewarning of some description? You at least know that we're going to be talking about art, presumably.
Very, very small world that is. That's a very small word.
Bad blood.
Okay. Opportunity to make a fool of myself. Bad blood, a conversation with me, Bill Wadman. Okay.
um, have you got bad blood with anyone?
Yeah, a few people.
What does that mean to you?
Um, uh, I think usually, typically, it's probably more of a, somebody has done somebody wrong, so there's just like this latent anger,
Latent anger.
misunderstanding, often, probably.
Sorry.
Bless you.
Can anger be latent, Bill?
Yes. Well,
Mhm.
come on, you're British. You're good at keeping things under wraps, even though it's actually happening underneath, right? Like it's a whole thing.
Are you trying to typecast me?
You know me. I love putting people in things and categories.
No, no, no. I'm just looking at whether anger is actually ever anything other than
Active.
really boiling,
Yeah.
bubbling. Latent
Uh
anger seems like a bizarre concept, actually, to me.
yeah. I mean, I think it gets fossilized, right? It gets which actually makes it more resilient.
Right. So it inures itself against future circumstances by being suppressed.
Yeah,
But
probably.
nonetheless, it's still highly potent. Can something be potent and latent?
Oh, yes, because it can be affecting things that have nothing to do with it, you know?
Bad blood. Do you believe that anybody could just be born with bad blood? A slightly different context there.
Well, if you ask the Catholics, the original sin, that's bad blood.
Well, joking aside, I mean, there are lots of ways in which we come into the world already with bad blood.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, where you're born, who you're born to, the state of the world in which you're born, before you even get to take a breath, stuff's already set on you.
Right? Bad blood. When you've had bad blood with someone,
Hmm.
has it been your choosing?
N- uh, no, very rarely. I bend over backwards to avoid confrontation most of the time.
Oh, me too, but it doesn't mean there's not bad blood.
Sure. Yeah. But it really it eats away at me.
What brings bad blood into our culture?
Competition. Hmm.
So I'm interested in your description of something that essentially becomes resilient through its festering nature.
I mean, just to some extent, I mean, you know, racism becomes festering in society in a lot of ways, right? It's like
Right.
very difficult to push out. It's very resilient to destruction, despite its absurdity. Um,
Is there a resilience also to the release of the effects of racism?
I don't quite understand the question. Can you reform that?
Um, so racism, the thing,
Yep.
is a resilient and unfortunate element of our social world as humans.
Sure.
Mm, but in, I guess, like reparation
Hmm.
is the reaction to racism so resilient to reparation that it can never be healed.
Yeah, and reparation can also lead to more bad blood in a different direction. You know,
Yes.
in trying to fix bad blood, you can create more,
Keep
um,
talking.
which is probably part of the most insidious thing about any of this is that it feels like an unconquerable problem because the more you try to fix it, the more flawed it becomes, you know?
Does bad blood breed itself?
I think if you're not actively trying to fix it, yeah.
I chose this painting because I didn't know
Almost
the
looks like a
author.
quilt, doesn't it?
Yeah, so Dawn Williams Boyd is part of, I think, several different groups of civil rights activistic groups, people who make protest works in various forms and formats. She's alive now, she's American. I don't know very much about her, but I saw this image. And first of all, it struck me as a really strange composition because the lead takes us from the bottom to the top in the wrong diagonal that we're used to
Hmm.
in terms of uh, Western art.
Hmm.
And the lead goes essentially the opposite way to the way that we would normally be taken.
Do you think that was a conscious decision?
I don't know, but it's that the head is at the bottom. Uh, I think is a fascinating composition. But
Mm.
that aside, that's what drew me to the painting. But the thing that it shows us or is giving us a representation of is something that I was also not particularly aware of. And I wonder how many people actually in Britain are aware of this at all. I think probably in the States you're more aware of what the syphilis experiments were. They lasted
Oh, sure. This isn't a big thing in the UK? Like
not
this
as
isn't a
far
piece
as
of
I'm
history you guys
aware.
know? Sure.
So people watching in the States will I would assume, know about this.
Sure.
Whereas for me and the people I've spoken to over here, nobody seemed to know about it unless they were fans of hip hop.
Oh, okay, sure. I mean,
Um,
it's interesting because there are the sort of I don't know how to put it. Like there's like the 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 list of really egregious, very specific moments in the last 150 years of American anti-black racism that and Tuskegee syphilis experiment is like one of the sort of things that comes up a lot, you know.
for those people
Where
who don't
for
know,
those people who don't know, doctors gave syphilis to a number of black men in the South in America, saying I think they said that they were giving them a vaccine of some kind, and they gave some of them syphilis to test to see basically like what syphilis would do to their bodies without their knowledge. Um, and they only did it to, well, they did it to black men, and then it didn't come out for years later. It's sort of the inhumanness of what the medical establishment could do to Black Americans,
yes,
Black
I,
men in
I think
particular.
I mean the span of time is quite incredible. Actually, it was a 40-year span
Yeah,
this experiment was conducted within, and in that time, I think over a quarter of all men in this experiment died because of this experiment.
yeah. Well, syphilis is, you know, and yeah, and they had the ability to cure it towards the end, and they didn't. I think is also a
Yeah,
big part of it.
yes.
Yeah.
This kind of bad blood is, bad blood in one way. Syphilis is a blood
Literally bad blood.
bad blood. But
Yeah.
I wonder about the bad blood it breeds. Bad blood between races, the bad blood between
Sure.
other groups, whatever the group might be.
Yeah.
It could be that bad blood is created between camps of sex or sexuality. It could be that suspicion drives us apart. Blood seems to be a very powerful kind of currency.
Especially for people your and my age who grew up and became young adults in the age of AIDS. At least in America, like, it was, if you have sex, you will die. If you go near somebody who has AIDS, who, is HIV, who has blood, you will die. I mean, it was real scary stuff in this early 80s. I don't know if it was the same way over in the UK.
Yes, I would say
Yeah,
so. And I also think that, again, this is about divisiveness, the bad blood between groups of people, how we
sure.
are separated from each other,
Yeah.
and that blood does it either actually or kind of symbolically.
Yeah.
Bad blood boils between us.
It's also frustrating in a lot of these cases, especially with Tuskegee and these kinds of instances where it's like a small group of people does a terrible thing to another relatively small group of people, but that infects everybody across the country. It's like this. It's like it's just very frustrating because the amount of damage that can be done.
Well, blood is emblematic. It
Yeah.
stands for all people.
Well, and we require it to live, right? I mean, it's like the ultimate life force. Classic.
Have you ever seen your own blood?
Sure. You mean in what context? I mean, I've cut myself really badly. I've, gotten blood taken. I've gotten bags of blood taken.
Yeah.
Have I emptied out all my blood into a bucket and then put it back in? No.
Mm.
I'll tell you though, I have a friend who had a stem cell bone marrow transplant in the last few years. Her blood's not her blood. It's somebody else's blood, which is a whole other crazy thing,
Yeah.
But yeah,
I mean, I know that there's a lot of victimization of people because of their blood,
sure.
discrimination against people because of their blood, not
Mm-hmm.
not just the color of their skin or their gender or their sexual preferences, none of that. The actual blood itself is a means with which to discriminate against or to find cause for some kind of issue.
Distinction. Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, even the like term mixed blood, right? Like this kind of or the Harry Potter, mud blood kind of theory, right? Which is, you know, you have multiple kinds of blood in you because, somebody was of one ethnicity or race or color, whatever. The other one's another religion or whatever. That kind of stuff is crazy too. So we use the blood description to describe all kinds of different distinctions. It seems like a very we use it as a shorthand for a lot of things, I think.
Yeah. What does it
What part of
mean?
this person's body is that right there?
The
What am I
belly.
looking at?
The belly.
Oh, I see. Okay, I see it. Yeah, yeah. Sorry. It looked like almost like an arm like this for a second. Got it. Go ahead. Sorry.
No, Gina Pane, important, I would say. Obsessed with self-mortification. But nonetheless, very powerful way to draw attention to the passive female through this quite violent seeming action. Slow and violent. Anyway, blood used to describe the separation between races, between well, chuck anything at that one.
Sure.
Gender, sexuality,
Sure.
gender. We're divided often by the thing that we all have that is necessary for life.
Because people assume that your blood is different than my blood is different from somebody else's blood.
Well, yes, and I know it has since received lots of criticism, but the Benetton adverts from the
Sure.
early 90s, we do all have hearts that look pretty much the same,
Yep.
and our blood does look pretty much the same.
Yep.
Certainly isn't distinguishable between people with different colored skin or people with different identity of any sort. The blood is the blood, but bad blood, it breeds such contempt. I've been wondering for a while where it comes from. Bad
Like,
blood.
yeah. Yeah. Why do we describe division or tension between two people or a group of people as bad blood? That they can't mix? Is there some element of sort of incompatibility? Like it's inevitable?
Well, do you think so? Are humans destined to always have an element of bad blood? Do
Yes.
all humans have bad blood?
Yeah, yeah. I think because psychologically, in groups, out groups, different people are like us. There's always going to be those divisions and the lines between them. And those lines are the bad blood, right?
Hmm. I mean, again, this idea of blood as a currency. I don't know about you, but here there's a big drive to get people to donate blood.
Sure. Didn't you donate blood last year? Didn't you go donate blood?
No, I can't. I'm not allowed to.
Oh,
Which
I could have
actually, I
sworn
think in
I.
itself has always been quite an interesting thing for me to know is that I cannot give blood because I have had blood transfusions before
Oh.
1995 or whatever it is, which
Oh, and
is
so they're worried that there's HIV even though there's not.
actually CJD.
Oh, really?
Hmm.
Weird. Okay.
Yeah. So, and unfortunately in the UK, more recently, ongoing for the last few years, certainly, huge scandals about infected blood being given, especially to haemophiliacs.
It's funny. I always forget about the fact that the UK is pretty much like the only place that generally ever that mad cow has ever actually shown up. You know what I mean? It's been like an actual thing it's in your consciousness far more than it is in America.
I wonder what the data is on that, Bill, because I can't
Oh,
imagine
I'm
for a
sure, but I'm
second
just
that
saying that
there's
like there are
not.
laws about it there, which I mean I'm sure, of course it's a medical thing here. It's just like we don't ever discuss it. It's funny.
Mm,
Prion diseases. Whoa.
mm. Anyway, I mean, what a collection of artists, actually. I mean, Serrano, people get pissed off with Serrano. They think he's just, you know, a
But that,
subversive for subversive sake.
yeah, I think it's sometimes kind of trite, but yeah.
It's, could be quite superficial. But at the same
Yep.
time, blood and semen, thinking about divisions, our society riven with these kind of fissures, these chasms, these divisions between us all. It does make a good point, I think. There's not much
Mhm.
else to it but the actual point.
Yeah.
But by the time we get into this, the kind of the addressing of like the stereotype of female or feminine passivity or harming oneself, quite simply drawing the blood of our frustration, chuck any old proverb or phrase at it, blood, sweat, and tears, or
Sure.
bad blood. And then this one I thought just was interesting. And again, this is somebody I didn't know, Esteban Ramon Perez.
Are these
Um,
dyed in blood or anything like that, or is it just sort of red fabrics?
no, this was about a division of bad blood within a community.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Um,
But it interestingly almost becomes camouflage-esque, like it gets lost in itself.
Yes, and actually there's lots of hidden things in this particular work. You know, it's kind of like looking for faces in clouds a bit.
Hmm.
But there is stuff in this that is otherwise kind of hidden, but it speaks to the bad blood of who we each think we are. And this came about because apparently he had witnessed the division within his community outside of LA, I think. Um, it was a boxing match, I think, had been taking place.
Okay.
And both of the boxers came from kind of Hispanic heritage, Latin American community that I don't know, was from that area or something. And the whole of his family and all their friends all fell out over it. And really kind
Over a
of
boxing match?
over a boxing match. It just struck me that there's such a potential always for us to be separate to each other and to find reason to brew our bad blood.
Sure.
Why do we do it, Bill?
I think a lot of people look for it. I mean, look at football clubs in the UK. You know, I mean, that alone is just like, I'm a Liverpool person and you're a Manchester United person, and therefore we have to hate each other or whatever. It's like, really? They're playing football. Like, get over yourselves. It's a game.
Right. But
You
you
know,
know
it's
what? I've looked on, maybe not in horror so much, just more uh it's not surprise either. I'm not surprised by it, but I've looked on with interest, I suppose, every time I have watched football with David
yep.
and realized that I'm watching nationalism,
Oh, sure.
for example.
Yeah. It's tribalism. It's all those things. It's giving for the people who need that input. It's giving that input without people going to war, you know.
But it is warlike. There's
Sure.
war in blood, isn't there? Is blood
Yeah.
always a violent issue?
Isn't it funny though that blood is life sustaining, life giving, and yet when we can see it, that sort of is the symbol of destruction, right? Blood's being spilt, being wasted. It's being, you know, all these kinds of ideas.
Well, I have to say it's why I asked you about, you know, have you ever seen your own blood?
Yeah.
Um,
I've also fainted from seeing my own blood.
well, yes, to see your own blood, there is something that can't be quite explained properly, I think.
Hmm. Part of you is outside of you now.
It makes no sense whatsoever to see large quantities of one's own blood.
Hmm.
And the kind of register of it,
Hmm.
the conscious register of it, means something trips in your brain. It's frightening.
Yeah.
And of course, in art history more broadly, we could have looked at thousands and thousands of paintings from the
Well,
Western
and the
canon.
yeah, the Christian symbolism of Christ's blood and all this kind of stuff. Sure. I mean, yeah, we could go down the rabbit hole.
Yes, we could, but instead we have these. And they all really are about the same thing. It's about a means to divide us. Bad blood. What about good blood? As you
No one
say,
ever talks about good blood.
life giving, something that is the same, that unifies us. Your blood is my blood.
Well, your transfusion, right?
Right.
Somebody else's blood in your body to get to restore you.
Yeah. I'm grateful.
Yeah. Do we have to go give blood now? Is that what happens?
Go give blood. I mean it, Bill. You're allowed.
How do you know I'm allowed?
I'm making a sweeping assumption.
Yeah, you're making sweeping us. See who's putting people in boxes now?
Bye, Bill.
Bye, Sandy.